Good evening, my true crime horror fans. I have an interesting evening horror story just for you. I want to take you back to April 8th, 1963, when two twins are born. And these twins are unusually close even for twins. They don't have the time of day for anybody else but their own selves. And they were born to a couple where there was a stay at home mom. June and Jennifer Gibbons were twins born to Aubrey and Gloria Gibbons. For a young age, you could tell there was something different about these girls. They were cute in how similar their activities were to each other, but there were great differences in their twinsiness as well, like the fact that they didn't speak to anybody else but themselves or their dolls. Everybody was an exclusion to them, even their own parents. Their relationship only grew more and more complicated as time went by, with the tale that brought them to an insane asylum, leading to one of their deaths, leading to one of their expirations. The girls hailed from Barbados and came to Britain in the 1960s. They were part of what is known as the Windrush generations, where hundreds of thousands of people from British colonies came to the UK as immigrants. Aubrey as a member of the Royal Air Force, while Gloria was a housewife. And their first girl, Greta, was born in 1957, and their first boy, David, born in 1959. The couple was overseas in a military hospital when Gloria gave birth to June and Jennifer on April 11th of 1963. Two baby girls born that were attached mostly to themselves and not to anybody else. They took longer than usual to start talking, but this was no sign of alarm, but it could have been a precursor of what was to come in the future. Nothing is cuter than twins girls who are nearly alike in every way. I mean, think about it. Some of the cutest, Ashley and what's her name from the Full House, they were just like the cutest baby twins ever. And now look at them. They're a little eccentric, but I think that's what TV can do to anybody. How they look and how they dress was similar in every way. That sounds sweet until you consider that they were literally each other's worlds, no outsiders. They only spoke to their dolls. They did not have friends. They used to get bullied quite often because of their dark skin color. I guess apparently that was something that stood out and was different. And you know how kids are. They'll be the first one to point out and take advantage of anybody who's different than the norms that they're around at the time. They also spoke a language that they could understand between the two of them only. You know, twins do have a lot of twins speak. It's kind of unusual when you think about it. You know how they always say you're born alone, you'll die alone. Well, that's not the case with twins. They don't come into this world alone, and they didn't spend all that time formulating. And there's just that unusual bond that you see between them. I've always been intrigued by it. But these girls took it to another level. There was a bond that was more like something sinister between the two of them that flowed. Twins often adopt similar traits and similar actions. They would walk next to each other all the time. They would walk as if they were doing like a military style walk type of formation, each one putting the leg forward at the same precise moment so that whoever was watching them would think that they were seeing double. They would freeze up if they caught anybody watching them, though, and they would move again until whoever was looking at them would look away, and then they would go on again. It was so in unison that their breaths would be taken at the same time. This was undeniably odd, even for twins, but had not yet crossed over to the realm of being disturbing. They seemed like such bright young girls with the love of reading and writing, which made up for their inability to communicate in other ways. They did move around a lot, and because that the bullying often persisted wherever they went, because of course they had something different that other people didn't have. This led to struggles at school, and their problems would just keep growing until they reached a boiling point where they didn't want to go to school anymore. And you can't blame them. I mean, school is hard enough at that age. One day in 1976, it was time for everybody to go get their injections because, they used to give them out in school like that back then. All of the kids were crying. I remember having to go into the school gym to get that done as well. And I was crying too. Not till I went up to get my shot, but I wasn't crying before that. A lot of kids were, though. It was a really scary time, not knowing what had to go through. And then they tell you, like, don't move your arm when they give you the shot. It could split your arm in half because of the pressure. I mean, there was just a lot going around behind it. So the girls, when it came up to their time to get their injections, they were non-perturbed, didn't bother them in the least bit. The person giving the injections thought that was really strange. So he wanted to have a psychiatrist look at them, and he sent them for speech therapy, realizing that they had this twin speakies between them that nobody else understood, which later came out to be like a Caribbean dialect mixed with English. They just developed their own speakies. That's not unusual for twins at all. The breathing and the walking together, a little more perplexing. So they did go and watch the girls and took a look at them and, see what was going on. They realized that it was predominantly English that they spoke, but they added Barbadado speak slang weaved into it, and it was spoken so rapidly that a lot of people couldn't tell what they were saying. They knew what they were saying. They probably didn't even have to talk to each other. They were in clearly of need of special education, and then this finally became apparent to everyone. They would receive more individualized care as the girls still would not communicate with others. They wanted to try something different. So they're like, hey, let's have them communicate in writing, because that seems to work for a lot of people. So they also wanted the girls to be separated as well, because they thought they were too interdependent on them. So they gave them, the reading, writing thing, and they were really good at it. Both of them were good at writing stories, but they were suspenseful, horrific stories. I tell horrific stories too, but they're based on real life. Their stories that they brought up were like crazy stories. And back then, it's not like now, you know what I mean? They're like, WTF, what's wrong with here? That they would be thinking in this kind of manner. So they separated the girls, and they thought they would be better off for it, that they begin to develop their own personality and their own lives and move forward. Well, June, they wasn't having that. June acted like she was paralyzed. She would neither speak nor move without her sister. It was like she was powerless to do anything other than to be frozen in bed. It was clear at this point in time how unhealthy this relationship really was. But what do? They're sisters. This would imply that one girl had a hold on the other by the way they were so interdependent on each other. The thing is, when you're around them, you couldn't tell who had the upper hand, what was going on, what held them together, what was keeping their personalities in such sync. And of course, you will never know, because you'll never know what they talked about behind the scenes or what kind of agreements they came to. But eventually, they even knew that something was going on. In their teenage years, of course, they were putting their thoughts down on paper, and they really thought that was a good outlet for them. They were expressing complex thoughts in poems, essays, short stories, and even novels. June self-published a novel called Pepsi Cola Addict, which detailed an affair between a teacher and a student. The pugilist, Jennifer called, where a doctor kills his dog and used his heart as a transplant. These stories were strange and depicted characters driven to committing disturbing illegal acts. You wonder what the hell makes the girls think of things like that. The diary contained information that let us in on the world of the girls. We have become fatal enemies in each other's eyes, referring to each other, the sisters. These girls were so wrapped up in their own world, they believed to be the best of friends, though. The truth, though, is that they were the worst of enemies. We feel the irritating, deadly rays come out of our bodies, stinging each other's skin, June wrote. I say to myself, can I get rid of my shadow? Impossible or not possible. So it was this kind of life and death struggle between the two of them. That, as long as both of them were here on Earth, they could only be wrapped up in each other. There was no room for them to move forward or to be separate individuals as long as both of them were alive. Without my shadow, would I die? Without my shadow, would I gain life, be free, or left to die? Without my shadow, which I identify with a face of misery, deception, murder, June wrote. She was trying to imagine her life without her sister. She was not sure if the death of her sister would be the way for her to break free, or if she would cease to exist as well. They were both young and sheltered. The girls were able to function better the older that they got. But as soon as they were exposed to the real world between alcohol, drugs, and men, their lives took a turn. They started to get into these vices. And in 1981, in the fall, they took to a life of crime. For 5 weeks, they committed acts of vandalism, burglary, theft, and arson. I just can't believe that. That's just crazy shit. It was an attempt to lead Pembroke's Technical College in flames that they got caught with 16 counts of burglary, theft, and arson. These girls were summoned to Swansea Crown Court where they pled guilty. Under the Mental Health Act, they received a sentence of indefinite detention in a mental health hospital. Once they institutionalized the unemotional legal pantomime went on around them without touching them. They were just unaware to what was going on. For the sentence that sent them to a mental institution, they were unusually unemotional about the sentence. They did write about what was happening, though. Not surprising, the girls were going through a tough time. It only got worse when they were put away. Each of them wanted to get away from each other, but they couldn't because they were just bound together in fantasy and in crime. We may never fully understand what went on between the two twins, but we do have June's words to give us clues. Please, God, don't let me suffer as much in my new life as I have here. Let me be bold enough to speak openly. Let me trust the doctors and nurses and no longer be afraid of people. For the past 7 months, I have been a soul with no hope. Don't let this disease paralyze me again, destroy my abilities, tying my tongue like firewood. What a horrific place to be. So the more they learned about, the more mystery that went on, the more you can understand, but the more you can't understand. They wanted to be without each other. They wanted to have their own lives. They just couldn't do it. They felt like as long as there was one of them alive, as well as the fact that they were stuck in asylum. They wouldn't be let out until about a decade later. When they did get out, they were on a heavy cocktail of antipsychotic drugs. They felt creatively stifled because of that, of course, because that shuts down a lot of your shit when you're on that type of thing. They were feeling bad over it. They didn't know what to do. Life would have been feeling pretty much hopeless at this time. On a car ride to the hospital, it was closer to home and there was a medium security facility. Jennifer's physical condition was so diminished that she was brought to Prince of Wales Hospital on March 9th, 6:30. When they looked at her to find out why she passed away, Jennifer was 29 when she died. It was a sudden surprise. It was a piece of the puzzle that had gone on between the two of them. It was determined that she had myocarditis, which is inflammation of the heart, which comes on suddenly. There were no drugs in her system, no conditions of her health, which defy explanation as to why this happened. It was eventually revealed, though, that the twins had had a death pact. One twin felt like she had to sacrifice herself so that the other twin could have a life. 1 year after Jennifer died, June moved from the Caswell Clinic into West Wales, where she would start fresh. Three of her sister, Marjorie Wallace, said that they were both at the hospital. The twins realized liberation could only come with death of one of them. So Jennifer decided to sacrifice herself. This may sound like a grand heroic gesture, but Jennifer was largely emotionless when she said, "We weren't going to speak to anybody. I'm going to have to die." It sounds like a far-fetched idea, but Wallace knew to take them seriously, and she became very frightened when that happened. And of course, that is exactly what happened. Jennifer decided she was going to die for June to be free. Postmortem ruled out any drugs or anything like that to her physical condition. It's strictly a mind over matter thing. The thought of Jennifer's mind being able to shut her body down to end her life is difficult to grapple with, but the bizarre nature of it is in line with everything else of Jennifer and June's story. I don't even know what to say about that. What a horrific, horrific thing. And sometimes they say, that one twin gets absorbed by the other in utero. Maybe this was an incomplete process that should have happened in utero that later took place in real life. Another odd thing about the sisters, as so many things were strange between the two of them and not understandable for us as average people looking in on their life, is when Jennifer had made the decision that, she needed to exit stage left in order for them to have any kind of fulfillment in life, her to fulfill her sister's wishes, and her sister to have a life to live that ends up being for the both of them. So Jennifer had already announced, that she didn't want to eat. She was going to eat when she got to the other side. Although it didn't make much sense to them at that time, not too long after that, Jennifer did pass away. But while she was in the hospital, they were together and June was sitting there. Jennifer decided she needed to take a nap. So she puts her head down on June's lap and she actually slept. But while she was sleeping, her eyes were wide open. I don't know. That seems like a highly odd, irregular behavior as much as the rest of their life was. And then not too long after that, Jennifer was gone, and now June tries to go on the best she can, living life for the both of them. Okay, guys, I just wanted to finish up the twins piece by letting you know I did go out and check out that movie, The Silent Twins. It pretty much documented what I've listed here for you. It shows them walking in unison. It seems like June always walked in the back. Jennifer was always in the front, if the movie is correct. So it wasn't that they walked a line, they walked one behind the other. And it appears, although they say it's always hard to tell who was in charge, there could have been a shift of who was in charge at times. But it seems like Jennifer was mostly the one who decided what and maybe even the type of games that they were playing. Because in the morning when they would break up, in the morning when they would wake up, it was one twin's assigned task to start breathing first. And the second twin could not start breathing until the first one had started breathing. So I'm sure that set up a little bit of dichotomy to, be mean or inflict some kind of damage on each other. And then the next scenario is, there was reference in the research I did that they were involved with men, and that brought on the alcohol and the drug use as well. What I found out is that the boys were a brother. They said two brothers. I'm not sure if it was a brother or a cousin. I think I saw both there. But anyway, um, I think they were two brothers from the way the movie went, and they had a history of uh, drug abuse as well as they were pyromaniacs. So I don't know why these girls were attracted to him, but they were. And then there was some salacious things that happened between the two of them, looked like totally consensual between the twins and these men. So there is another piece out there where the remaining twin, June, does do an interview, and it's really hard to understand what she's saying because of her enunciation. But she does feel totally grateful. I'm sorry. So there is an interview with June out there, and it's really hard to understand what she says because she does have that verbatim list that they have, and she speaks, it's a little too hard to tell what she's saying. But what I did get out of it is she is aware of the great sacrifice that Jenny made for her and lives for her every day, visits her, talks to her, lives her life for both of them. And again, that makes me go back to, like in utero when one twin is absorbed by the other. Maybe this was an incomplete process. We know that there's nothing that can't be messed up as far as his physicality and life goes. But after seeing that movie, I'm even more convinced of that. The movie, there was some artistic deference taken that I don't know if they were trying to explain what the mental situation was like for the twins. That kind of part was kind of odd. I'm not familiar with the music because it was a foreign movie, but it does give very good insight into what the twins thought about each other, how they fought, how they hated each other, how they loved each other, and how now that one is here, only one is left to go on for the both of them. Anyway, strange, horrific situation. It is maybe the greatest love story ever told if you look at it in a fashion. With that, love you guys. Talk to you next episode.